Welcome to IMUA Quick Bites, a micro-learning series featuring subject matter experts in the inland marine industry. I'm Eileen Monreale, Education Training Specialist for IMUA, and I'm honored to welcome John Kellerman, Senior Counsel at the Hanover Insurance Company, to provide a quick bite. Let's get personal, commercial versus personal inland marine. Take it away, John.
Thank you, Eileen. It's a pleasure to be here. I'm very excited to be able to speak with you today. Um, but a little bit of housekeeping before we jump in. Please keep in mind the disclaimer on your screen. Nothing contained herein should be considered legal advice or compliance advice. So with that bit of housekeeping behind us, let's jump right in. So back to the basics a little bit, right? We have to kind of understand where we've been before we can understand where we're going. What is inland marine insurance? Well, inland marine insurance generally is property coverage for material, products, or equipment that moves or is transportable, or that's instrumental in transportation. When we think about property coverage, we tend to think of real property like buildings and homes and things inside of them, right? Commercial business owners and homeowners policies typically cover these kinds of property risks. But sometimes that kind of coverage is all that a business needs. In other cases, an inland marine coverage specifically is needed for certain kinds of property, like jewelry, fine art, electronics, computers, camera equipment, things of that nature, solar panels, and many more. The list is goes on, right? So let's dig into that a little bit. Personal versus commercial. Many people unfamiliar with inland marine insurance may consider inland marine to be just one uniform type of insurance product, when in reality, from a regulatory and practical purpose, we need to break that down a little bit more. Personal inland marine typically refers to coverage for items owned or controlled by an individual, while commercial inland marine typically refers to coverage for items owned or controlled by a commercial entity. The items insured are often the same. The driving factor in that analysis is just who owns or controls the property, not the items themselves. One important note, though, to keep in mind is that certain kinds of inland marine coverage are typically only written commercial. We think of builder's risk, specialized professional property classes like communications and networking equipment, some types of medical or scientific equipment, and one that most of us are familiar with, motor truck cargo coverage, things of that nature, typically only written commercial. So just keep that in mind. Okay, so why is this important? What's the big deal, right? From a regulatory standpoint, some states exempt certain inland marine coverages from certain form, rate, and rule filing requirements. But we have to be careful here because inland marine is a form of insurance coverage that's regulated by each state, and it's regulated a little bit differently. So it's important to review all applicable statutes and regulations. Even more granular in that analysis is the personal and commercial inland marine distinction that we talked about moments ago. So when we pull it all together, always be sure to review your applicable state law for, first, whether or not filing of your particular business or coverage class is required. Second, whether or not a distinction between personal and commercial use is made in the statute or regulation. And third, outside of that filing context, you have to ask yourself, are the use rules associated with your business or coverage class limited or prohibited in any other way? So at this point, you might say to yourself, where do I start? That's all great information, but how do I use that, right? On your screen is a QR code that is a link to the Inland Marine Underwriters Association, IMUA, Underwriter's Guide to State Rate, Rule, and Form Filings, which is a state-by-state guide to filing requirements with direct links to applicable state statutes and regulations. And I'll give the viewers just a second to access that QR code while you're watching. It's also available, a link on the IMUA member website. Okay, so how does it work? Let's dig in a little bit. Let's take a look. First, you identify and find your policy state in the guide. Then you identify the filing requirements and exemptions in the table as an informational guidepost. So in this case, we're looking at Rhode Island. We can see the column on the left is the filing requirements. The next column over is exemptions. And the third column is citations, which are cited to the information from which the left two columns come. There's an additional requirements column in the event that there's secondary or other information to be aware of. And at the bottom of the page, you can see here, there's a link, a hyperlink, which takes us to either the statute or the regulation from which this summary is taken. It's always important to look at the actual statute before you make any crucial decisions. So the supplemental link that I just pointed out, it takes us here. In this case, we're looking at Rhode Island. It takes us to the specific section of the code that deals with inland marine filing requirements and exemptions. As you can see in the text here, commercial inland marine is exempt from the filing requirement, but importantly, insurance issued for personal, family, or household is not. So that's a really important distinction to make that you may not have realized if you're glossing over or just thinking holistically. It's very important to remember that each state has different requirements, and Rhode Island is a good example of one that parses out personal versus commercial for filing purposes. So remember, always refer to the specific statute or regulation before proceeding with the filing decision. And the IMUA filing guide is a great place to start that analysis. So I'm John Kellerman, Hanover Insurance, Office of the General Counsel. I'm happy that I was able to come and talk to you all today. So thank you for your time. And now I'll hand it back to Eileen.
Well, thank you, John. One more slide to go, because I want to point out some other on-demand education here. So this has been really helpful information for any inland marine professional to understand. And thanks for pointing to the all-important IMUA State Filing Guide. If IMUA members would like to learn more on the broader topic, check out these on-demand offerings, including the demystifying filed, non-filed versus admitted, non-admitted issues, or manuscript policies, legal considerations. These and much more are available on demand at no cost for IMUA members. Thanks again, John, for helping IMUA to advance education for the inland marine insurance professional. Until next time, I'm Eileen Monreale with IMUA Quick Bites.